All right, here we go. Here we go. Marie, how are you doing tonight?
I'm fabulous. How are you doing, Simon?
I'm doing well, and I hope everybody joining right now are doing well. It's great to see all the numbers coming in. So as you come in, please feel free to drop in the chat. Where are you calling in from? It's always great for us to have an idea of where everybody's calling in from. These webinars are always super, super international. So it's always good to see where everybody's calling in from. And for today, Marie, our amazing account manager, will be manning the chat. So if you have any questions throughout the webinar today, just shoot them in the chat. And Marie will be answering. And yeah, let us know where you're calling in from. If this is your first Talaera webinar, welcome. My name is Simon Kennel. I'm the People and Culture Manager at Talaera. And what is Talaera? What are you wondering? This is a communication company. Is it an English company? What do they do? I'll tell you a little bit about that. But first, I want to introduce Marie, our account manager. Marie, how are you doing this evening?
I'm awesome. I know that it's a little bit warmer where I am in the Southern Hemisphere in South Africa. How are you doing over there, Simon? It's probably already pitch dark in Denmark.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely pitch dark, and it's very, very cold. So I've got my snuggly socks on tonight. But otherwise, this thing warms me up. I'm glad to get going. So let's definitely, yeah, let's jump into it. So
It's
again,
great being
welcome.
here with you again. It's been a while.
Yeah. It has, and it's great to see. We have so many participants who like join a lot of webinars and are kind of webinar regulars. So it's great to have people joining in. A little introduction. So if this is your first webinar with Talaera, well, what we do at Talaera is we provide business English training for global companies. What does that mean, right? Well, we work from companies that are at startup level, scale up, all the way through to enterprise level. And we provide communication training. And that can take the form of presentation training, negotiations, whether it be foundational level English or email writing. There's just a host of different things that we cover and that we help with. One of them is obviously feedback, right? This is something that goes across cultures, it goes across different sizes of companies, and it's always a really kind of challenging subject, right? So yeah, we'll be talking about that today. But let us know as we get going. Tell us where you're calling in from, and we're going to be talking about the cultural differences and things like that in feedback as well today. So it'll be really interesting to kind of get your take on these differences as we go through. And again, while we go through the webinar today, there'll be some different questions. So by all means, throw your answers in the chat, and we'll love to incorporate them and integrate them. And Marie will be just jumping in and letting us know what you have to say. All right. So Marie, before we start, where are people calling in from if we have anybody in the chat?
Well, very interesting today, and I'm recognizing some of the names from people that are regulars, but we've got Germany, we've got Oshkosh, maybe WI is Wisconsin, forgive me
Hey, that's right.
if I'm wrong, non-American here. Then we've got Scotland, we've got the DRC,
Wow.
Congo. We have, again, Virginia, Italy, Madagascar, Vancouver, Brooklyn, Toronto, Krakow, Houston, Calgary. So some very exciting ones there. I don't think I've seen DRC in here before, so that's very interesting.
Yeah, always great to have new people in and joining. And yeah, like I said, super global, and hopefully this will be something where everybody can take a little bit away as we go through. All right, so Marie, what will we be talking about today?
Well, as you all know, feedback is a very large topic. So to try and whittle it down into what we can do in 45 minutes, Simon and I have come up with just a few points that we're going to touch on today. So we're going to look at just a little bit of statistics like feedback in numbers, like what does the stats say about people wanting, what do they want from in feedback? We're going to look at what is good feedback. We're going to unpack the Talaera feedback framework, which we'll give you a link to. And then we're going to look at some of the cultural components of feedback. So how does it differ between countries and cultures?
Yeah. So again, and you said it, right? There's so much, to kind of pack in here. And this is always the challenge with our webinars is how do we balance this out, right? So we're not going to give you the full play-by-play, full course on feedback today. It's going to be, 45 minutes where we're going to be very focused on making things very practical for you, that you can start to use these tools right away and start to go ahead and apply, right? Which is what we're all about as Talaera, is taking the practical tips and applying them, right? So let's go ahead and jump in. And if you're wondering if you're going to get the slides today, yes, you will. We will send over all the slides to you. So don't worry about that. You'll get everything. Okay. Like you said, feedback is super important, and corrective feedback, right? Done appropriately, done well. Marie, has this been your experience just in general managing, but also just working across cultures and working, in the different places that you have? What is this kind of role that feedback's playing for you?
Well, I think the more companies you've worked at, the more you realize that different companies have different feedback styles and cultures. So I think I have been privileged, maybe privileged and cursed to have been on both sides of companies with great feedback culture and then those that didn't have good feedback culture. So I would say the ones I learned the most were the ones that didn't have good feedback culture, because taking from there, every company I've gone to after that, I would say I could learn and apply what didn't work. So good feedback definitely has shaped my career and my personal development as well through, companies that I had managers that were providing good feedback in my teams and people that I could learn from. So I would definitely say I have learned from this over in my career. And what about you?
Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things, kind of as a people ops nerd, an HR nerd, a performance nerd. One of the best things that you can do to increase performance is consistent and effective feedback, right? And having those feedback loops as tight as possible is the best way that you can do that. And I think similar to yourself, I've had great managers that give me, actionable, real effective feedback. And then I've had managers that just tell me, everything's great, you're doing awesome, right? And then I'm living in this kind of la la land where everything is perfect and I'm not actually seeing what I need to do to improve, right? And so that's a real scary kind of challenging thing that we really need to focus on. And here is we're going to be talking about today how you can kind of break through and do that. And this is another, I think, amazing statistic that we saw from Gallup, which, I think I was discussing this with someone the other day of like, it's actually pretty amazing when you think about how many people go to work and they're not entirely sure what's expected of them. Like they're not crystal clear with their managers on, what they should be doing and to what level they should be doing it. And this is like a scary thing for companies, don't you think?
Well, I mean, I think that little picture that you put in there captures it. When I look at that picture, I see confusion, and confusion leads to stress. And
Yeah.
I think if we are not able to give or receive feedback, rather, so let's look at it from the perspective of an employee. If I don't receive feedback, I don't know how I am doing. So especially, let's think of a new employee. you don't get feedback. You don't know if you are on the right track. What I'm doing, am I doing it according to what our mission is? And that causes stress. And I mean, a stressed employee is also not a productive employee. So for me, that statistic, when I saw that 50% of employees don't, only 50% know what their managers expect from them, which means 1 out of every 2 employees don't know what they are supposed to be doing according to their managers' expectations of them.
Right. Right.
So I think this is shocking.
Yeah. And we're not here, we're not even adding in the English as a second language component. I want you to really think about that, right? That's adding another layer of complexity that we work on a lot with managers who are working internationally in their second language. It's, how do you give feedback in your second language across cultures, right? It's just layer on layer of complexity. But we have to start somewhere, right? And we have to start with the acknowledgement that living and working in this kind of area of ambiguity is so dangerous for productivity. It's so dangerous for the employee and the manager themselves when it comes to things like stress, things like burnout, right? Not being on the same page. And that's really where we're focusing on this today. We want to play a little game here, right? So we want to get you involved in the chat. I want you to throw in what emoji signifies giving feedback. So giving feedback, what emoji signifies giving feedback to you? Is it, I mean, I know I have a few and I'm going to put them up, but I want to see which emojis signify giving feedback to you. And I think this is something where I've heard from people it can be very nerve-wracking. I've heard from people that they love giving feedback. I don't know. I'll start with mine, but I want Marie first before I throw mine in. What are people saying?
Well, I'm getting some awesome emojis here, some of which I also selected when I was doing this, thinking of what emoji signifies feedback to me. A lot of these are coming on. I'm getting the face palm, and I'm getting the big eyes like terrified. I'm getting I'm so happy that you're giving me this feedback. So it is just absolutely coming in here. What is scary is, there's the ones that are like, oh, I'm very nervous. Oh, I don't know what's coming. So what do you think? Simon, give me the one that you think.
This was mine. Yeah, this was mine.
Wow.
And I don't know if anybody here relates to this, but this one was mine. It's like, I'm happy. It's a good thing we're giving feedback. I got a sweat bead coming down just a little bit because I'm hoping that this person will take it well. If we're aligned, if we have a great relationship, then I can feel more comfortable. But if it's not someone I'm super familiar with, this is sometimes where I'm at. Now you sent me a couple actually before this, right? So this was what does this signify for you?
So this one to me is instances where I received like where somebody said they wanted to provide me with feedback, where I didn't trust them to have my best interest in mind for like the reason for the feedback. This might be because of ways I've seen them deliver feedback in the past, or I don't have a good relationship with this person. So for me, this was a feeling of lack of trust. And so it's almost like I'm terrified. What are they going to say? And perhaps even in being the person delivering the feedback. So this is a person that I know doesn't accept feedback well. And so I'm almost terrified that they are not going to take it well, like be receptive of the feedback I'm giving. So that emoji for me in both senses, for the receiving and for the giving. And then there's another one.
Yeah, so this one's interesting. Yeah, so you're kind of a little bit like, a little bit curious here. And
what do you say? It's like, I'm interested to hear what you're going to say here. A number of people actually selected that one. It's the thinking one. It's like, okay, I hear you. How am I going to apply what you're saying? And is this really relevant? Because at the end of the day, we get feedback and then we have to apply that feedback. Or we can say, I heard your feedback, I don't agree with it. So, so it's a little bit of like, I'm considering what you're saying. So that's where it is for me.
And it's fascinating, right? Because when we think about all these emojis, and I know it's a fun game, but it really shows, it illustrates how much emotion is involved in this, right? When we consider that, oh, this is just a thing that managers should do, right? It's just a tick the box thing. It really isn't. There's a lot of emotion involved from both sides. Now, we want to kind of talk a little bit about obviously the benefits of, and I think we should have put in good feedback here, right? I think we should be very, very clear about that, the benefits of good feedback. Walk us through, Marie, you have these 4 clear points here at the top. Walk us through how these clear benefits come from feedback.
Sure. Before I do that, I just want to comment very quickly on a couple of notes that are coming in on the chat, where whether it's feedback, there's a comment there on how feedback should be delivered. So that was, face-to-face versus via email. And then also how feedback should be delivered, like it should be actionable. So Jacinta, I note your comment there, and we are going to get to that a little bit later in the slide. So just bear with us until we get to your comments there, because they're very, very valid. And I look forward to you bringing that up again a little bit later. All right, so the benefits of feedback. Now, if you think about what you said earlier, not knowing your expectations, what is expected of you by your manager, if you actually give feedback on a regular basis and it's constructive, so people actually know, hey, this is a safe environment where I'm getting feedback because it's actually to the betterment of the company and our missions here. So it gives you a clear expectation of what your roles and responsibilities are. If I don't know what is expected of me, like how can I actually perform my role? The next one that I looked at was access to resources necessary to perform the job. So when I am also performing a job, like working on a project or something, if I get feedback from my boss and they say, okay, you need to do this or you need to do that, or maybe they identify something, they can give me access to what is necessary to perform my job. So if they see that there's something that I'm lacking, like there's some point I'm missing in what I'm doing, it might be because I don't actually have the tools necessary to do the job, which a feedback session can actually bring to light. Common mission, if we say, look, in our company, we give feedback because we want to all be able to achieve our common goal of X, Y, Z. Now, if I don't get feedback, I don't know what that common mission is and whether I'm on track to achieve that or not. And then the big one, higher engagement. I know we did a nice webinar on engagement and what all the benefits are of engagement, but an engaged employee actually is a very productive employee that goes above and beyond and saves the company money. So having a culture of constant feedback is an opportunity for us to actually save money, to meet our mission, achieve our mission in the company. I don't know if you have any, I look forward to your comments on that, Simon.
I mean, I think they're great because they touch on all different kind of parts of the business, right? Which I think is critical. If you have more benefits that you think we didn't list here, add them to the chat, right? I mean, let's push this kind of conversation around the positive effects of good feedback, put them in the chat, anything that we forgot. But I mean, my point, I think what I added down here at the bottom was there is kind of a, this mixture that we're looking for, these ingredients that we want for high performance. And when I think about, the teams that I love being on, those are high performing teams. And what makes up, a high performing culture, a high performing team. And a huge part of that comes down to expectations and feedback, right? Is clear expectations and feedback. Obviously, connection to a purpose, connection to the why is a huge part of that. But if you look at these 2 other points here, I mean, how do I know if the expectations are super clear unless there's a consistent feedback loop, right? Because things will change so much, right? What was true 6, 8 months ago might not be the exact same as it is right now, right? So are these feedback loops being, consistently run? And then that effective feedback, and that can add to this high performance culture, which, like you talk about, a high performance culture is obviously a culture you want to be a part of. If you have engaged employees, that going back to that webinar we did around engagement, yeah, an engaged employee is going to be so much more productive. If you think about those 50% employees that didn't know what expectations they had, I wonder what that productivity looks like, for that 50% that isn't aware of what their actual expectations are. So of course, there's a ton of benefits here. Sorry, go ahead.
What I actually, before you run off on that, I just want to say, another thing about constant and consistent feedback culture in a company is that our ability to then adapt to change very quickly. If you think about this enormous change that all of us went through in 2020, I don't think any of us was spared enormous change in our companies in a very short period of time. And through the last couple of years, I feel that the companies that were the most successful were those that, through constant feedback, were telling the employees, this is happening now, these are the changes we're going to make, this is what we have to do to survive in this in this changing environment. And so that constant feedback, if we're used to constantly hearing what is going on in the company, we can also adjust it. So that fluidity that comes with just adjusting, things are changing again now with economic downturn and all of that. And so knowing what's going on, we can adjust our methods and ways to reach changing goals in the companies.
And that information pulse you get from effective feedback throughout the company, right? Managers talking with their direct reports, then speaking with their managers, and you get this good feedback loop all the way through the organization, where then you can make clear and good decisions, right? And I think, like you talk about, the companies that succeeded were the ones that had those feedback loops working, and even still getting a sense of, what do their employees want? When are their employees effective? Are they effective working from home or hybrid, or do they want to come back into the office? And keeping that kind of feedback loop going. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see, in the next this period right now, but the next year is which company is pushing their employees back to the office. How that's
I think you're opening a can of worms here, Simon.
I love this can of worms. I'll open this can of worms all the time.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm also getting a lot of comments here in the chat, and there's a couple of things. I wish we could address all of it, because I'm getting requests here for providing feedback upwards. So and I know, that is an entire 3-part webinar that we can do just on that topic, is learning the skills to do feedback upwards. And Louise, we can actually look at this, the steps that we're going to follow in the webinar today. And there are ways that you can adjust it so that it is taken upwards. Then something else, people are saying on self-reflecting. Taking a step back, check the situation, the details for you to realize and change it positively. Individual work plans, and then questions on when you have provided feedback to an employee that isn't engaged. What if we provide consistent feedback to an employee, however they aren't engaged? Can that be changed, and any recommendations how? So that we actually address in our engagement webinar, which I think we are going to do another engagement webinar. So Patty, we will I'll share links with you afterwards for where we will be discussing that. Sorry, Simon, please continue.
No, these are all great. We love all of this. Keep going in the chat. We're going to try to answer as many of these questions as possible. Let's get into it. Let's dig into it. What is the tool that we have today, right? We're going to be talking about a specific tool that we use that I think is, it can be shifted if you need upwards, downwards, with peers, what have you, but we'll be talking about how to do that. Before we do that, we talked about good feedback, right? And I think this is something that Marie, you brought up when we were discussing this initially, was what is this difference, between feedback and then opinion, right? And how we're receiving it. I don't know if you're out there in the chat and you think you have a clear idea of what that difference is, please throw it in, because I think it is a real question we have to ask ourselves, because we need to think about, okay, when someone says this to me, I'm just viewing it as their opinion. I'm not viewing it as feedback, right? But it may be different for different people. I don't know, Marie, what are your thoughts on this?
I almost want to first wait and see if I get any responses in the chat before I give my opinion on what I think is the difference between opinion and feedback. So I guess for me, it is that an opinion can be right or wrong, and it's not necessarily based on fact or experience. In some instances, you can say, like, in my professional opinion, meaning I'm somebody that has a lot of experience in a subject, and so I'm giving you my professional opinion. All right. But for me, feedback is so much more. It's so much more than it's above an opinion. It's not judgmental. It is constructive. So it doesn't actually break down the person, and it doesn't get personal, like in that way. It also perhaps provides the receiver with a way of seeing something from a different point of view. So they can take a step back, like somebody said earlier. You take a step back and you say, well, I hadn't actually considered it this way. And then feedback is neutral. It's not necessarily a positive or a negative. So I know we're going to get to one of those, the traditional feedback model that people tend to fall back on. It's not necessarily positive or negative. It's neutral. It's like, these are the facts. This is what I think worked and what didn't work. So, let's find a way of bettering whatever this item is I'm giving you feedback on.
Yeah.
Some things are coming into the chat. Somebody says, yeah, it's difficult, but opinion sounds more personal and involves emotions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it can be influenced by your own personal biases.
Yeah, that can definitely be the case. I think, for me, I agree with everything you said. I think the big thing that stands out to me and how I receive, if this is just an opinion or if this is feedback, is if there is the intent to help. If I can see that their intention is to give me a perspective or a tool or an idea that they're seeing, this will help you do your job better because I want to see you succeed. I take that as okay, they're trying to help me. This is feedback. This is actually, helping me in whatever it is that I'm doing. And that means a lot to me if I can sense that, right? And that's one of the things we talk about, right? Constructive. Is it helpful, right? Yeah. Is it these things that signal to this person, hey, I'm here to help you. I want to see you succeed. And that's where we're going to be pushing this in. And I think that's going to be a big part of what we'll be talking about here today. Okay.
You know what I love about the chat? It forces people to succinctly, so very in a small summary, very quickly say what they want to say. And it's obvious, it's often a very good way of getting your message across if you get that right. So one person said, first, before you can receive or give feedback, you have to learn not to take things personally in the workplace. All right. So there's a bit of psychology for us, because first we have to address those things within ourselves. Like, right. I'm not taking this personally. So there's the first thing. And then somebody else said, opinion is how I want this or you to be. So like how I want it, whereas feedback is centered on the work that needs to be done. So I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. We have something a little bit controversial here. What is this approach called, Marie? I think you're pretty familiar with it.
Yeah, it's the sandwich approach. There's many terms for it. Let's stick to the clean terms for it. It's the sandwich approach. I'd love to hear, before we go a little bit into it, what do people think about this approach? It's the good, bad, good approach. Give us a thumbs up or a thumbs down for the good, bad, good feedback model.
This is the one where it's fascinating. You see this, like, people who are strong proponents are so strong about this approach. And then people who are opponents, they really don't like it. They're totally against it. It's interesting to see these kind of two different camps. I don't know. There's a lot underlying here, right? There can be some things culturally, there can be some things, just in terms of the workplace or how well you know the person. It's difficult to do a hard and fast rule of yes or no, but what do we have in the chat? What are people saying?
Ooh, let's see. No, 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 no. Yes, a little bit. No. Somebody else says, I like the feedback sandwich that that is coaching, evaluation, and appreciation in whichever way the employee needs the order. That's nice. Coaching, evaluation, appreciation. Okay.
I like it.
Oh, somebody else says they like this. I wonder, Simon, how much of this is, and I know you're a little bit more of an expert on that subject, but how much of this is culturally acceptable more? So in some cultures, this is the way you do it because this is how people are more receptive to it. And when is it not? So what's your thinking on this?
Yeah, so I was raised in the US, and this is, definitely very, very common, like a kind of hard and fast rule, manager rule of the, feedback sandwich. This is how you should do it. And this makes things, relatively easy. It's a basic formula. Everybody understands it and it works for everybody, right? And maybe that does work in some contexts in the United States. But as I've worked kind of internationally, I've just seen more and more that, okay, I had to scrap this very, very early because it is just ultimately a maze for some people where they're not truly understanding, like, okay, what is the inflection that you're giving here? What is the actual communication? You're telling me I did something well, or you're telling me, I did something really well. Then you're saying I kind of need to work a little bit more on this thing. And then you're saying, but in total, everything's really great. So now I'm going to walk out of here and I'm going to think, okay, everything's awesome. I'm doing just exceptional. And then we wonder as managers why 2 weeks from now that thing wasn't done or it wasn't improved. Well, your employee was maybe walking away with an idea of that was the most glowing review I've ever had from a manager, right? And this is a very common thing that we hear from a lot of the students that we work with. Yeah. Is this kind of problem. And I don't want to say it's US centric, but I know from my experience that's been very common.
I've just in the chat, I've just put a term there called recency bias. And if you look at the term for, because we have a lot of non-native English speakers, recency referring to recent, and bias is, my own, help me out here, Simon.
Your own understanding, you could say.
My own understanding. So the thing I hear the most recently is the thing I'm going to remember. So I do a presentation. My boss says afterwards, can I give you some feedback? I'm like, sure, bring it. Says, excellent presentation, beautiful slides, liked all the messages you gave. However, I feel that you spoke really too fast, that it was really difficult to follow what you were saying, and that there were parts where we really lost your main message. However, it was really lovely, and it was a beautifully presented thing, and I look forward to the next one you're going to do because you're so awesome and you really are a very engaging speaker. So now I'm hearing great presentation, great materials, I'm a good speaker, I was engaging. The whole bit about I spoke too fast is lost. And so I have not remembered that. I've remembered the most recent thing he said. So that is, it's just one opinion that I have on this method. However, if he had said, great presentation, I like what you did, I think it would be better if you speak a little bit slower because there were areas that we missed you. Now I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. I hadn't actually noticed that. So now I remember that part better because it's not sandwiched in between how awesome I am.
Right. Okay. So I think we're kind of in an agreement on the sandwich approach. Maybe in some cases, it might, in a very, very specific cultural situation. We have kind of tool.
I'm getting
Sorry, go
different things here on the chat, so not everybody agrees on that. So I think
ahead.
we're gonna definitely have different things here when it comes
what
to people's
what
opinion.
I'll what I'll say in lieu of just trying to be a people pleaser and make everybody happy is that we have now kind of moved away from that as a company, as individuals, where we move more towards this tool that we use, right? And this kind of way of giving feedback. So personally for myself, I don't use the sandwich approach just because in my experience it does lend to causing confusion, but we want to focus on these specific aspects here, right? So, Marie, if you can walk us through these our feedback wheel, like what are the key elements that we look for when we're giving effective feedback?
Sure. Now, I know we're going to get to this one again just in a moment. So I'm not going to go into great detail on this. So if you miss what I'm saying here, we're going to refer back to this wheel in just a moment. But what we have identified and how we at Talaera actually practice our feedback in our culture is for it to be timely. So, find the right moment to do it. It's direct so that it is very clear and honest. It's helpful. So the goal of the feedback is actually going to lead to a better achievement of our common goals. It's encouraging. So it goes beyond just the feedback. It is like, we believe that you can do this. It is uplifting, so it doesn't break down. And then it's very specific. There's a little bit of a different order to what I've just said there, but we'll get back to that in just a moment.
Yeah. So these are our key aspects. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this here in just a moment, and we're going to put it into our timeline of how we're going to do this and in what order we're going to do this. And if you already have an idea of how you would approach that, start to think about that, because we're going to come back to that in just a second. Really quickly, we need to talk about trust, right? And we're not going to spend too much time on this, but we really can't have a webinar about constructive, good feedback without discussing, the elephant in the room around all this, and that is the role that trust plays. We talked about the emojis and the emotions that come into this, and a big part of that is, can I trust you? Can I trust this situation? Can I trust in that, you're giving me feedback that will be helpful, right? When we talk about these ingredients for feedback to be effective, trust plays a huge part here, right? At the same time, you do need the willingness from your, whether it be employee or colleague or whoever, to improve. Do we have a culture of continuous learning, of growth mindset? Do we have a culture that we want to do better, on whatever it is, our task, our project, what have you? And these are things that you can signal, right? You can signal this by starting with asking for feedback first, right? You can signal this willingness to improve as a manager by asking for feedback, right? And being actionable, doing that in front of people. And that's a way to kind of bring these two ingredients together. But we need to have these two, in tandem working so that it'll be effective from both sides. Marie, what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, goes without saying, I definitely agree. And Jacinta captured it very well there, where she says establishing trust is the number one thing, like she said in her book. And I absolutely agree with that. Now, I mean, to put this back at you, Simon, like, how are we going to establish trust? I mean, this is something we can talk about for another hour, is how do we establish trust? So I hope you take us through your next steps before we run out of time.
Yeah, so we're definitely not sitting here waving the flag that we've learned the way for every company to establish trust, right? This is something that obviously there's a ton of work on, and we could spend so many more hours talking about this. We're not going to today. We just wanted to kind of send some materials here that we have that have been helpful for me. Obviously the role of psychological safety. What does that mean, right? Psychological safety, feeling safe in your environment so that you can make a mistake, or that you can, fail when learning, right? And doing that without the feeling that, okay, if I make a mistake here, I'm going to get hammered for this, right? Building that trust and the relationship. Project Aristotle through Google, they did this huge survey among all their employees around this, and they actually found that psychological safety ranked the most important factor when it came to effective teamwork. This is I would definitely recommend looking into that. And you can see some of the ways that they were working on, facilitating that and pushing that through for managers. So definitely, I think this is a key point when we talk about effective feedback. This role of psychological safety. This is something I wish we could just, click our fingers and then we would be able to create it. But it is something, just like anything, that takes that time, right?
We should
Now,
also put a pin in this for a future webinar and discussion in building trust in teams and companies, because it's I think everybody knows this is just the foundation for any kind of successful team.
Yeah, and I want to hear any people ops people in the chat, any managers, what makes a person receptive to feedback. So, we had the one comment about thinking about yourself, but I mean, do you have direct reports where they're just really good at taking feedback, or you see them and you give feedback and then boom, they use it and they facilitate it? What are those behavioral traits, right? The one that pops into my mind is hungry. Someone that's hungry for feedback. They want to know, they ask, right? Like, hey, what could I have done better, right? And those are, I think, contributors, team members that you see typically advance pretty quickly, is the ones that are hungry for that feedback. So if you have some behavioral traits, throw them in the chat, so we can see. Okay, we need to talk a little bit about tone, right? Radical Candor, this is a great book. I know there are some people that have their views on it. I think it's a good book for many reasons. One of them is this quote, right? Just telling people what to do doesn't work, but also thinking about how we tell people what to do, or the feedback that we do. This matters, right? And we talked about we'll talk about tone in a little bit, but how we actually give the feedback matters a lot, right? Let's jump into the framework here. So we talked about trust. We talked about the role of trust. If you think back to our wheel, right? We have our feedback wheel on the important components. Now we're going to put those into practice, right? So as we go through our 5 kind of aspects, and I'd be interested to know if this was kind of similar for what you all had in mind in terms of what gets set when, right? But there is a framework, right? And it starts with timely. Then we go to direct, then we go to specific, we go to helpful and encouraging. And we'll look a little bit at what that looks like. Marie, can you walk us through why we're using these in this order and how does that really look like?
All right. So first of all, timely. I mean, it doesn't help I come to you and I say, Simon, that webinar you gave 3 weeks ago, can I give you a little bit of feedback on that? And you'd be like, webinar I did 3 weeks ago, I've done 2 other webinars since then. I mean, like, which one? So timely, because it's one of those things that I need to be able to have it in mind now, so that I can apply that feedback that is relevant to the moment right now and what is applicable. Direct. Don't be abstract. Be very specific, saying this aspect of what you did, have you considered doing it in this way because, right? Specific, the reason why. I love this example. You are unprofessional versus you've been late 3 days this week. All right, so this might be my opinion, you're unprofessional, but the reason I'm saying is you've been late 3 times this week. This is affecting your work. We have to wait for you in meetings. So, very specifically, why am I saying that? Helpful. The goal of the feedback is for you to achieve our common mission. So it has to be really helpful, like something that can be applied. Marie, you speak too fast. The panelists cannot actually, or the attendees of the webinar could not follow what you were saying. Ooh, I hope that's not true, but yes, so being helpful. Encouraging. So I believe that if you slow down the speed with which you speak, your message will be more clearly delivered and people will be able to follow more. So encouraging and saying, like, I know you can do this because I have heard you slow down. So it's just when you get excited that you speed up again. So you're encouraging me to actually apply the feedback that you've given.
Right, right. And I think these are all important components, and they also matter on when you use these throughout your feedback. We're going to get into a couple examples here just so you can see it in action, but it does matter, right? Timely, direct, specific, helpful, and encouraging. I like to focus on the helpful and encouraging because it is really signaling again that you're here to help, right? I'm here to help you as your manager, as your peer. I want to see you succeed because I know you can succeed. That brings feedback into a totally different loop, right? All of a sudden, feedback goes from being this thing that's put on me to something that's being pulled, right? I'm being pulled in this direction in a positive way. And that can totally shift the way that, you know, your employee or whoever receives that, right? If it does have that helpful and encouraging tone. So tone, exactly, my last word right there, right? Like, it's not exactly just the words, but also how you say them. We are not going to spend I'm going to say, yeah, we're not going to spend enough time, but we do have other webinars that we talk a little bit about tone and how we're communicating. I definitely think you can probably get a sense of, you know, you can tell a lot, like when someone is speaking to you, if they're actually meaning it, if they are really truly feeling that to be helpful. If you do receive feedback that your tone is very direct, very harsh, maybe consider that, right? Like, maybe consider how is it that you're communicating, because tone also does matter in terms of how we are receiving.
Guilty. I am so guilty of that. I've definitely, and it was actually when I moved countries. So my tone as a South African, I can be very direct. And I've definitely been taken in by managers when I immigrated and said, Marie, just like your tone is a little bit harsh there. Do you think you can just adjust it a little bit? And I wasn't aware of it. So
yeah. So it does matter. It does matter. Okay. So in the chat, thumbs up or thumbs down. Is this positive or negative feedback? Or I would say, is this good or bad feedback, I guess? You know, hi, Anna. I sat through
good method versus bad method. So
yeah, there you go.
Have they applied the framework?
I sat through your presentation today, and to be honest, I couldn't hear anything that you said because I was too busy reading the slides. Maybe less text next time, huh? All right. So I think I've gotten some feedback a little bit like this from a manager before. I don't know how helpful it was. What do we see in the chat? Are we all?
We're seeing down. We're seeing down. We're seeing not great. Like, you know, okay. And somebody says they've got the point.
All right.
All right. Next one.
Anna, I sat through your presentation today. Great job. Everything was really good. You had a lot of interesting points on your presentation that I didn't have enough time to read. But can you send the slides to me? Okay, so what do we think? Are we clear here? Are we direct? Also, are we so? I mean, maybe it was a good presentation. Maybe I'm being a little bit a little bit too vague with my points here.
That's what I'm getting here. Somebody saying not clear, somebody saying so, people are saying no. It's like, somebody even said it's even worse.
Yeah, I wonder how many people in the chat have a manager or they know a manager that gives this type of feedback, because it is one of the most common is this feedback masked with a lot of positives to where it feels like the person walking away, everything's fine, everything's great, right? And that can be a real challenge.
It's not really feedback. No. It's more of an opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
Next one.
Hi, Anna. Do you mind if I give you a bit of feedback on your presentation today? This is where Anna says, yeah, sure. What's up? And I say, okay, so Anna, what do you think went well? Like, what do you think didn't go so well? Talk a little bit. And then I say, okay, I agree with you that your message was strong. However, your slides had a lot of text on them and it took away from the great message that you were presenting verbally. I think that some people in the meeting were only reading the slides and actually not paying enough attention to you. You should be the center of their attention. If you want, I can send over some presentations that I've seen over the past year that were really well crafted. I think they could be really helpful to see. What do you think? All right, so I'm really hoping that there are some thumbs up because I, I wrote this myself.
I've
what are
got it.
we,
This is great.
so what are we doing here, right? We're taking that wheel, right? So we're thinking about timely. Can I give you this? We just had the presentation. Can I get you for a second? I'm asking even like, hey, what do you think? I'm eliciting them from them. That's a good teaching term. I'm eliciting this feedback from them. And then I'm going in, yeah, I agree. But I need to tell you this, right? I think that your slides had a lot of text on them. And this took away from this message that you had. You should be the center of their attention. And then I'm going in, I'm being helpful, I'm being encouraging, right? I'm sending over material and I'm telling you it could be helpful for you. What do you think? So I'm taking all of these little aspects here and I'm really putting them in. Okay, so we have our kind of wheel, right? And again, we're going to send over all the slides. We have a few more points to get through. So you're going to have all of these. But again, think about when you're using these and in what order you're using these. One quick point, we always talk about rasa when we talk about how we're interacting. This is receiving feedback. Rasa technique is a really great tool to use. You can look up Julian Treasure. He has a great TED Talk on this, using this rasa technique where you receive, appreciate, you summarize, and then you ask again for clarity. And this can be a really important tool to use. We always say like the rule of 2%. If everything 98% of what they say is just totally ridiculous, what's that 2% that you could use and really think about like, okay, this could be effective. So definitely consider using this. Okay, we want to get into this because we don't have much time left. We're going to be stopping at the end, at the top of the hour, but we need to get into feedback across cultures because this is such an important topic. And I don't know about you, Marie, but it's something that I've just heard, from several of our clients, like this is a challenge.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we also, it's one of the most popular webinars that you and Paola do is the feedback across cultures. It's also, if I'm honest, something that I'm a little bit terrified of because I've worked in 5 different countries and completely naively, I have stepped into the culture pothole where I have said and done things in a way that was really not culturally appropriate for that country and that culture. So bring it.
Yeah.
I think you've got a lot of tips here.
Yeah, more and more our clients are, opening offices internationally, working cross-culturally, and this is just all the time we're hearing these challenges. We talk a lot about this, right? Like, what differences have you seen? So just really quickly throw in the chat if you've seen differences, like we just talked about, me growing up in the US, having this, bias towards putting a lot of positives around my feedback, right? A lot of these things can be culturally influenced, and considering that. I think for me, one of the first things to consider is the self, right? So before we start talking about everybody else when it comes to culture, we should really think about ourselves and our individual upbringing, right? Like what shaped us to interact in the way that we do. And the more understanding that we have about ourselves, especially in this topic, the better that we can be when we navigate, because we always want to start there. Okay. When we talk about feedback across cultures, again, everything is in relation. There is no good or bad. There is no right or wrong. Everything is in relation to other cultures, right? Because it's literally just a world going around. So everything is just in relation. When we talk about feedback, we can think about it on this scale. And this is from Erin Meyer. Some of you may be familiar. She does great work on feedback across cultures and cross-cultural communication. Check out her book. I would definitely recommend it. But when we think about direct and indirect negative feedback, you'll see these clear differences. We have managers from Russia that go and work in Thailand, and it's like the Thai employees think he's just so rude, right? And think he's very, very too direct, right? And so, and vice versa. We have maybe clients in Germany, and then they're working with teams in Thailand who it almost gets to the point where they say things like they're lying to us, because these differences in feedback are so clear. Again, the first step is being aware of these differences and really considering them. Same thing goes with leading across cultures. Now, I don't know, Marie, have you ever worked in a company, or have you seen differences across cultures when it comes to egalitarian cultures versus hierarchical, like just in the company?
Oh, absolutely. I have worked, and I am a dual citizen in Australia. And so I have worked in Southeast Asia. And so you have this open, like I'm your mate and we can discuss this. And if you have feedback and it comes back to something said right in the beginning in the chat, how do I give upwards feedback? Much easier doing upwards feedback in an egalitarian culture where I can walk straight into my boss's office and say, you know what, I know you said we should do it this way. I'm not entirely sure that's the right approach because I've had some, pushback from clients in this way, and can we discuss this? Or even in the meeting saying, I don't quite agree with that approach, and I'm not going to get into any trouble. Like, that's not a career limiting move. Whereas hierarchical, it is just not acceptable. I cannot, in a person in a position above me, actually give them something that says, I don't agree with what you're saying. And this is very difficult because it means you have to adjust based on where you are and who that person is. So, and we're in such a global world. I mean, think about our company. We are all over the world. We have to be able to read the room, and this is very difficult.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's very difficult. And, again, we have a whole webinar on communicating and collaborating across cultures. I would definitely recommend checking that out if this topic is interesting to you. A quick and fast tip I can say is when it comes to intercultural teams, create your own feedback rules, create your own feedback playbook so that you can use that to refer to, because sometimes it can be difficult when you have so many cultures to try to navigate across all of those. If you have a common rule book of a way that you understanding that you give feedback, use that, right? But yeah, I'll definitely say, the egalitarian Danes over here in Copenhagen, we are very, very egalitarian. It means a lot, right? I was riding my bicycle the other day, and the former prime minister was just walking down the street, and I gave him a wave. And it's just, that's the kind of level we go to here. Last thing here, just before we close up for today. And again, we're just adding the layers of complexity onto you. And this is something that we hear more and more from our clients is, we have Gen Z together with Gen X, together with the baby boomers, and how are we navigating this? I think it's fascinating that, this takeaway we saw from HBR, the older you are, the more feedback you want. I don't know if I necessarily fully agree with that takeaway. I mean, they have the statistics here, but I think it is something that we'll be looking at more at Talaera about how we can create some materials around this, around how we can navigate this. Because I don't know about you, Marie, but this is something where it's like there's only so many levels of complexity I can really take.
well, I tell you, I have had to adjust in my career. I've been in HR for just over approximately going on 20 years now. And adjusting to the younger generations coming in, and they have a greater demand on what they want, and more egalitarian, saying, no, that's not enough for me. I want more, and this is what I need in order for me to grow in my role. And I've definitely had to adjust. I mean, this is probably a whole nother topic we can go into. So just some things for people to think about when you go to the office tomorrow and you're speaking to a person in a different generation. See, maybe ask them, how would you actually like me to handle this with you?
Yeah, Yeah, I love that. Asking first, right? And that's a great way to do it. Okay, everyone. Wow, we threw so much at you. I mean, top of the hour, here we are. You have all of these slides. They will get sent to you. So our feedback wheel will be sent to you. You'll have that. If you are interested in learning more about Talaera, let us know. Like, we are here. We are ready to talk to you. We have a ton of cool resources. So everything that you saw today, a lot of that you'll see through our blog, our podcast. We have a bunch of ebooks. We have monthly webinars. Again, we'll be talking about communicating across culturally. And yeah, if you're interested in just getting access to our library, or if you're interested in doing one-on-one or groups or workshops, or even your company wants their own webinar, we can do that for you. So we're just over here mixing it all up for you. If you're like, oh my gosh, Marie was just amazing, how can I get in contact with her so I can learn more about Talaera? By all means, just hit her up. I know we'll have some links in the chat as well, and we'll reach out to you. But Marie, I really enjoyed it. Like, I mean, what was your thoughts about it? How did you think?
Well, I feel like this could probably, the discussion could carry on, especially if we start looking at everything people had in the chat and what they wanted to discuss. So it's awesome. And it's always nice chatting to you, because it's that brainstorming and kind of like dusting off the cobwebs of, well, how do you think about this? So I just love these discussions.
I do as well. I do as well. It's always a pleasure, Marie. And to all of you out there, we're creating this Talaera community. So drop in your LinkedIn if you want to, and people can join, and you can mix up and mingle and keep learning. That's always what we say here at the end of every webinar. So thank you, everyone, so much. And as always, keep learning. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right. All right. Have a great one. All right, Marie, you have a great rest of your day.
And you too.
All right. Bye, everyone.